Jim Carafano, Colonel, Doctor, Vice President of the Heritage Foundation, is one of our plank holders. Follow him right now at Jay. Can you call an Army guy a plank holder? Is that
sure,
just,
yeah,
is
no
that
problem.
Not for just Navy guys?
Works for me.
Okay, Jay Carafano on Twitter. We have so much to discuss. We'll talk about Tiananmen in a moment, but we have to discuss the rioting on the streets, the comments by former members of the Trump administration who even had the position of Secretary of Defense. Your response to the last 11, 12 days, Jim?
Well, I thought they were, particularly General Mattis's comments, and I have all the respect for his military career, I thought they were completely unhelpful and not constructive at all. And I'll tell you why. There's three things going on the streets. I've written a lot about this. I've got stuff in Heritage website on Daily Signal things. So you have protests, perfectly legitimate, serious, very serious issue, understandable why people would want to go to the streets and express their views on that. Public safety has an obligation to help people protest lawfully. So that's one. But then you have rioting, looting, arson, in some cases murder. Thank you. These are inexcusable. And violence against innocents is not justified for any political period. That has to be dealt with. And then you have professional agitators. And the evidence keeps piling up on this every single day, both at home and abroad, instigating violence, in some cases, coordinating, organizing violence across the political spectrum in the United States, far right, far left. This is a very complex, difficult situation. And mayors and governors need to bring to bear the resources that they can to deal with all three. And so cherry picking, is unhelpful. And I just think not recognizing the complexity of the serious issue and being constructive, saying everybody needs to pull together, state, state, and local, to deal with this, to take care of all 330 million American peoples. That's what we should be hearing from all our leaders, and we're not. What we're hearing is partisan picking apart, and that's just wrong. And look at D.C. They've had their squabbles. Okay, Bowser and Trump, maybe they're not going to do beers. I get that. But let's be honest. When they deployed the National Guard in Washington, D.C., violence disappeared, rioting disappeared, the streets are safe, people are protesting their butt off. That's proof that when you pool your resources together and you act in concert, and you make streets safe, everybody wins, except the rioters and looters.
Exactly, the people who wish to profit from tragedy. We're talking to James Carafano, Vice President for all things national security and foreign policy at the Heritage Foundation, heritage.org. Join today. I'm in the middle of a piece. I'm going to finish it if it kills me. I spent 11 minutes on my diatribe against the general because I've worked very closely with the Marines. I was, a teacher in Quantico for years. And I'm just going to pull out two sentences from Mattis's quote-unquote statement. He said, we are witnessing the consequences of 3 years without mature leadership. One thing. And then the second one, we must reject and hold accountable those in office who would make a mockery of our Constitution. Is either of those true?
Well, no. I mean, if you look factually at the record on foreign policy, and talk to the listeners about leadership. Yeah, I mean, the record is relatively successful. I mean, Russia's been cowed, Iran's in its place.
ISIS,
North Korea. Everybody thought we were going to war with North Korea. ISIS has been crushed. Afghanistan, one of the most problematic places, is actually holding its own. Iraq is having elections, pushing the Iranians out. So look, vitriol aside, it's difficult to say that America hasn't stood up for its interests on foreign policy the last 3 years. That's just a fact. And then making a mockery of the Constitution, Jim? Also not true. I mean, if you look at the law and how the law has been applied, we have many, many laws that govern responses to public safety and the federal role in that. Nobody can point to one that's been violated. They can't. And my experience, I was there right at the get-go. One of the first things that I was deployed to do was to explain and defend the president's travel moratorium the first weekend. Yeah, I remember that.
And what happened when we were challenged? We didn't ride roughshod over the American people or the courts. The president said, okay, I believe this is important for national security. And we took it every step of every challenge, local, district, federal, to the Supreme Court.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, if you look at border security, if you look at the travel moratorium, and a number of other issues, all of them have gotten adjudicated up to the courts. Hard to think of one where the president's actually lost. I mean,
no, he's won all of them,
and even in the impeachment, where it was claimed he committed treason and everything else. I mean, this is, and look, General Mattis can have any opinion he wants.
It's America,
it's perfectly fine,
right.
And
but you don't have to say this,
but he's wrong.
Not only is he wrong, he's a member of the cabinet. A former member of the cabinet, and there are certain things that are seemly and there are certain things that are unseemly, and your point is the great one. There are certain things that are helpful and some that aren't. In the last couple of minutes, let's talk about the technical issue. Can you explain or help our listeners explain what is the role of the military here? What is the role of the National Guard when they deploy? That's
a really good question. It's something I've been writing and talking about. Normally, first of all, it's perfectly appropriate to bring in the National Guard to support civil authorities. We have been doing that since the dawn of the Republic. We had citizen militias. It's a very, very,
all presidents,
very, very common
all
thing.
Governors.
Typically, in this situation, what do the National Guard actually do? They do two things. One is they guard stuff.
Yeah, protect stuff.
Which means that if you're not out to loot or destroy something,
you shouldn't have a problem.
That's right. The other thing they do is they provide support to the first responders, to law enforcement, to firemen, to EMTs.
Keep them safe.
So they can do their job. So when they say this is interfering with the protesters, it's not. As a matter of fact, when the National Guard is employed correctly, it actually supports the protesters.
Yes.
Because it makes the environment in which they protest safer, and people are more free to express their concerns and don't have to worry about being caught in a crossfire or firebombed or beat up or something. So the notion that the militarizing is such a disingenuous term. This is so sad. A month ago, we were praising our military because they were stepping up in hospitals and doing all this other stuff, and they were just fine. And now, all of a sudden, if we see a uniform on the street, we're militarizing the response.
That's
so not true.
That's amazing. So it was fine, and they were cool and dandy when the military was swabbing your throat to see if you had coronavirus, and 4 weeks later, they're little Hitlers. That's an incredible point.
But again, everybody says, well, we're worried about the protesters. They're not there to hurt the protesters.
No.
They're there for the rioters and the looters.
Bingo. We're talking to Jim Carafano. Follow him right now at Jay Carafano. Go to heritage.org today, the mothership of the conservative movement.